Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michael Clarke, and I'd like to welcome you all back to our Farm Green webinar series, where today we are welcomed by Sarah Penrose from AHDB. Sarah is a Senior Knowledge Exchange Manager within the Beef and Lamb team at AHDB, where she plays a key part in the knowledge transfer and innovation, providing expert support and advice on livestock sustainability and efficiency. From a family beef farm in the heart of Yorkshire, Sarah has a strong passion for the beef sector, completing a degree in animal science, then a master's degree in sustainable agriculture. But that just wasn't enough, as in 2019, Sarah undertook a Nuffield Farming Scholarship where she travelled across the world investigating beef heifer management, which makes her the ideal speaker for our webinar here today. The series today focuses on heifer management and that first calving down at 24 months old. We have chosen this topic to discuss as part of our Farm Green series to help give our farmers and producers the expert advice and tips on how they can implement and improve existing practices on their own farms. With the cost of keeping suckler cows becoming more and more challenging, it is vital to improve efficiency to maintain sustainable production systems on farm, something Dunbia is very passionate about. Efficiency and sustainability going hand in hand to produce a successful supply chain, working together with our producers to tackle the challenges faced by our industry. And with that, it is my pleasure to hand over to the star of today's show, who will now deliver a talk on this subject. Sarah.
Thank you for that introduction, Michael. So, yes, as Michael says, my name is Sarah Penrose and I work in the Beef and Lamb Knowledge Exchange team at AHDB. And I'd really like to thank Dunbia for inviting me to speak to you today. So I'm going to be focusing on heifer management in the suckler herd. I'm a very passionate beef farmer's daughter, and as Michael says, I undertook a Nuffield Farming Scholarship in 2019 looking at heifer management. And what I want to share with you for the next 15 to 20 minutes or so is just what I saw and what I think as an industry we can learn from it. So before I do that, I always think a good place to start is just talk about who AHDB is, for those of you who don't already know. So I work for the HDB, who's the English Levy Board, and we're really here to promote the reputation of the beef and lamb sector. So whether that's creating new export markets, promoting British beef and sheep meat here in the UK, or funding research to support the positive role beef and lamb can play in the environment. We recently undertook a vote back in spring last year where farmers were able to have their say on what they wanted AHDB to focus on, and they're really highlighted on screen now. So it's building on reputation, and that includes marketing, exports and insight and evidence. And if you'd like more information on what AHDB Beef and Lamb are focusing on, then please do head to the AHDB website and have a read of the Beef and Lamb sector plan. So moving on to my Nuffield. So like I said, in 2019 I was lucky enough to be awarded a scholarship, which was a truly fantastic experience. Now I travelled, I spent about 10 weeks travelling. So these are some of the places that I visited and some of the cattle that I saw on screen now. So went to Brazil, to Canada, Australia, the US, as well as countries closer to home as well. And what I set out to do was look at how we can successfully calve our beef heifers at 2 years of age. I'd been working for HDB a couple of years and had been talking to many farmers about why calving at 2 really stacks up financially. But actually, they always came back to me with concerns, and they were things like getting heifers to the right bulling weight so that they can calve at 2, worries about calving heifers for the first time at 2, and also concerns about getting them back in calf. So I really set out as part of my Nuffield to try and find some of the solutions to these barriers. But I suppose, like all Nuffields, the topic actually grew, and instead of just primarily focusing on calving at 2, it was actually what, as a suckler industry, do we need to do to try and improve the profitability and sustainability of the industry. And something that really stuck out for me, which nicely ties into heifer management, is actually the importance of the cow. So I think in the UK we've focused a lot on building on terminal traits, including growth rates and carcass characteristics, but sometimes forget about how important maternal traits were. And this is something that really hit me as I travelled. It didn't matter where I was in the world. The suckler producers that I visited were all focused on the cow and improving maternal traits. So I set off on my travels, and my first visit was to the Canadian Beef Research Council in Canada. And I really wanted to, thought I had a great topic, really enthused, and I went and visited 3 researchers there and talked about what I was wanting to achieve, how can we make calving at 2 successful? And they looked at me as if I had 2 heads and said, we've been calving at 2 since the 1970s. So this really is just common practice elsewhere. I think sometimes we're a little bit behind other countries when we're looking at things like this. And really, there's so many positive reasons for calving at 2, and these are outlined in this slide. So first of all, financial. So on average, you're saving £600 per heifer by calving them at 2 rather than 3. And some really good research in Ireland has found that heifers which calve at 2 actually consume 65% less grass, at 96% less silage, and 33% less concentrates than those that are calving at 3. So lots and lots of reasons to be calving at 2. Heifers which calve at 2 produce more calves and more calf weight, and they also remain in the herd longer. And I think another really important benefit of calving at 2 is it also has the potential to cut emissions by 12%. And we all know how important that is to do. So there are loads of reasons to calve at 2. It's just making sure you have the correct management to ensure it's successful. And this was what my Nuffield was looking at. And really what it found was it's just about getting the basics right. Unlike other Nuffield scholarships, it's nothing revolutionary, it's nothing new, it's just about good management. And that's focusing on 3 things. So that's genetics, it's selection, and it's nutrition. And what I'm going to do for the rest of my talk is just give a bit more information about each of these key drivers. So as I travelled round, the thing that kept coming up was functional suckler cows. And I really started to think about what are the traits that we want in our cows that means they're profitable and functional. And these were some of the things that kept coming up. So the first one was, of course, that she calves at 2 years of age, unsurprisingly. The second one is that she weans a calf every 365 days. Now, fertility is so important in the suckler herd if we've got any chance of making any profits. Interestingly, I'm a bit of a numbers geek, and I've spent a lot of time looking at BCMS data and number crunching that. And what that's showed is that actually only 82% of suckler cows in England are weaning a calf every year. So that means there's 18% of cows that aren't producing us anything but costing us to feed them and also producing methane emissions. So fertility is so important. The third thing is low maintenance costs. So we want a cow that will thrive off grass and forage alone and won't rely on costly concentrates. And the final thing is that she remains in the herd for at least 5 years. Now, this is because a cow doesn't cover the costs to develop her until she's produced at least 3 calves. So in the dairy herd, this is a lot sooner. So I think they've only got to produce 1 calf and 1 lactation to cover their costs. Whereas in the Suckler herd, they've got to produce 3 calves to cover that cost. So making sure that your cows are lasting at least 5 years is really important. These were some of the cows that I was really impressed with. So the cow on the left, she's a beef booster, which is a hybrid. And this is a cow that I saw in Alberta in Canada. Now, as you can see, there isn't a lot of green grass for her, but she's in really good condition and her calf looks really well as well. Now, the beef booster, they focused on traits for what they deem are profitability traits. So they include fertility, milk, conformation, hardiness, and disposition. I visited this herd in August, and as you can see, there isn't a lot of grass. It was about 30 degrees when I visited. And the farmer actually said to me that in the winter, the temperature can get down to -30. And obviously they get a lot of snow. And he doesn't actually feed them any supplements until the snow gets above their eyeballs when they're grazing. So that shows what these cows have to contend with. Now, what fascinated me the most was the fertility results that he was getting. So he was actually getting a 93% conception within a 55-day breeding period, which is fantastic when we think about what these cows are having to contend with. So it really shows the benefits of selecting hard and having the right cow to fit your system. Now, another herd that really impressed me was, so this is one of the heifers shown in the top right hand side of the screen. Now she's a maternalizer. Again, another hybrid, and she consisted of Red Angus, Tarentaise, South Devon, Red Poll, Hereford and Devon. And this farmer again was achieving a 94% conception rate in 48 days. Interestingly, anything that didn't conceive within that 48 days was sold, and there was no room for sentimentality. And I think this really shows the importance of having the right cow for your system. I think often we try and choose, we try and fit the cow to the system, and I don't think that really works. We need to focus on having the right cow that can thrive off grass and forage and produce these really quality performance. Now, why is genetics so important? Well, when you look at these 3 bulls, you can't really tell me which one will be which will calve easily, which will produce heifers with good milkiness, or produce docile heifers. And this is really where genetics plays a key part. So all of the producers I visited were using EBVs, or even further on, they were actually using genomics as well. And really, when we're thinking about breeding our heifers, we really need to think about using a maternal bull. I know here it's quite difficult because we often have small herd sizes, so we're only really wanting to run 1 bull across the whole herd. Well, actually, I think this is where AI can really play a part. So if you can, choose our best cows, AI them with a good maternal bull to breed our replacements, that's definitely the best way to go. And like I say, the things we want to be looking at are calving ease. So that's direct and indirect. We want to be looking at milk. So we want a good milky cow. And we also want to be looking at cow size. And I'm going to focus on calving ease and cow size in a little bit more detail, because they were really things that hit me as I travelled round. So calving ease. Now, I think in the UK, we seem to have got used to calving cows, and it's only when you visit producers elsewhere that you actually see that it just isn't a thing in other countries. And I think it really hit home when I was in Florida in America, and I visited the Desiree ranches. Now they have 42,000 suckler cows. Yes, that is correct, 42,000. And they actually have one cowboy to every 1,000. So calving cows is just not an option. And as they said, you know, the USA would never accept the amount of dystocia here in the UK. So I really think it is something we need to focus on. And there really is a big profitability reason as well. So calving cows, obviously it costs you time. It can cost you money in terms of vet bills. And of course, you lose a lot of time with that cow as well. So usually if we have to assist her, it takes her longer to come back into bulling and conceive again. And of course, there's also a high risk of mortality as well. So I think as an industry, we really need to try and break the stigma that a big calf is a good calf. We really need to be using bulls that have good calving ease figures. Now, the other thing I wanted to focus on is mature size. Now, when I present this to groups of farmers, it always gets people shuffling in their seats. Now, cow size has been increasing steadily over the past decade or so. So if we look at this graph shows since 1987, if we follow that purple line, which is cow size, you can see there has been a gradual increase over the years, and it kind of mirrors the trend in prime carcass weight as well. So actually carcass weight has been increasing about 2.5 kilos per year. Now, why is mature size important? Well, it's highly correlated with maintenance costs. So as a cow gets bigger, the amount of feed she requires for maintenance increases. And interestingly, once the cow gets over 750 kilos, she also requires feed of a higher quality as well. Now, AHDB did some really interesting research, and they looked at what is the optimum mature cow weight in the UK. And they actually found that it was 680 kilos. And they took into consideration lots of different things. So cull cow value, carcass weight of the offspring, and they came up with that 680 kilos, which I think is about really where we want to be looking at. Most of the cows that I saw when I was traveling were much smaller than that. So they're around 550 kilos. But I think the one good thing that we have here in the UK is grass. So we can probably have a bigger cow size than those elsewhere in other countries where grass is often a limiting factor. So what are the traits we're looking for in our heifers, which will mean they will become good cows to keep? Now, as a farmer once put it so well, a good heifer will always turn into a good cow. So what are the best ways for us to identify those best heifers and the ones to retain? Well, one of the best ways to do this is by having a tight breeding period. Now, most of the herds that I visited, we usually put in the bull in for around 60 days, so only 2 months. And that was really so that they were indirectly selecting for the most fertile heifers. Now, these heifers shown on the bottom right-hand picture, these were some heifers in Nebraska in the US. The farmer was called Dan Kelly, and he had 1,100 Angus cross Simmental cows. So each year he produced about 550 replacement heifers. Now, what he was doing was he AI'd every single heifer to one service. Anything not in calf after that time was put into the finishing pen. There were no second chances. And he'd actually worked out that he was much better off doing that than he was trying to persevere to get them in calf to sell them as a 2-year-old heifer. So I think it really highlights, sometimes we're a little bit worried when we have a short breeding period and some heifers or cows aren't in calf, but actually it stacks up much more profitably to sell those barren heifers or cows rather than keeping them, giving them another chance and trying to get them back in calf. So if we can, let's have a really tight breeding period, because at the end of the day, fertility really is key. And the last thing I want to talk about is nutrition. And this is probably the most important when you're looking at calving heifers successfully at 2. Now, I've kind of split this up into nutrition pre-pregnancy and nutrition post-pregnancy. Now, ideally, heifers need to weigh 65% of their mature weight at breeding. And that means they need to grow around 0.7 kilos a day from birth right through to 15 months of age when we're going to serve them. Usually a heifer will grow at around 1 kilo per day whilst she's on the cow. So that means that from weaning to conception, she really needs to be growing about 0.5 kilo per day, which really should be achievable with some good quality silage. Now, what I find is that it's often that first winter that's probably the most difficult to keep these heifers growing. Obviously, it's winter, they're housed, and sometimes we might put this group of animals in sheds that maybe aren't suitable for our finishing stock or calving cows, and sometimes they don't have enough feed barrier space as well. So they're all really important things that we need to make sure we're getting right, just so we're keeping these heifers growing. They do need some good quality silage if you've got it. I know sometimes that's tricky. So if you can, and the silage isn't the best quality, then do top them up with a little bit of supplementation. As Travis said, who's in this picture, so he was the heifer development manager at Desiree Ranches, and he said you really can't starve the profit out of heifers. So if you need to, give them a little bit of extra supplementation. Now, they were at Desiree Ranches, they had a native cross, a Brahman Suckler cow. And Brahman naturally reach puberty a lot later, so they naturally calve at 3 rather than 2. But Travis has actually worked out that he's much better giving heifers some supplementation to get them to calve at 2, rather than letting them just run on and calve at 3. So it really shows, even if you have to supplement them just a little bit, it really does stack up and it is still much more profitable. Now, nutrition during pregnancy. If there's one thing you're going to take away from this presentation, I suggest this is the bit. Now, nutrition is so important during pregnancy and after calving as well. So interestingly, excuse me, around 75 to 80% of calf losses occur within the first 42 days of conception. And most of that is down to changes in the environment. So if we can, after the breeding period, keep everything the same. So sometimes we might, for example, bring heifers in to AI them, get them in calf and then turn them out. We should ideally leave it a couple of months, keep everything the same, keep the nutrition the same until about 2 months after, and then you can do what you like with them. But it's that stress around those early days of pregnancy that can lead to calf losses. So just something to keep in mind. Now, body condition score is so important. Now, this is for many reasons. So ideally, heifers should calve down in body condition score 3, which is kind of average body condition. So they're in good condition. I know some producers will try and thin heifers down as we approach the calving season, with the mindset that that will hopefully reduce any calving risk. Now, actually, it does the opposite. So if heifers are too thin when they calve, they lack the energy to calve, and they also don't produce the colostrum. And something that I didn't realise either is that the egg for the next pregnancy actually starts to develop in the last trimester of the previous pregnancy. So if we're thinning heifers down in that last trimester, it actually affects the viability of the egg for the next pregnancy. And that's why with heifers that calve in poor body condition score, we actually struggle to get them back in calf again to calve within 365 days. So please, if there's one thing to take away, calve them down at body condition score 3. Studies have shown it won't increase calving at risk, but it will mean you're much more successful at getting these first calved heifers back in calf. And I think the other thing to remember is, calving at 2 does require a bit more. These animals do need a little bit of tender loving care. So they are the priority group. So once they have calved and you can get these heifers out, do that, get them onto any preferential grazing, and make sure the nutrition is right, just so we can make sure we get them back in calf to calve again within 365 days. And it's also worth bearing in mind that weaning can be used as a tool. So as soon as that calf gets to 5 or 6 months of age, and if the heifer's losing weight, then do wean that calf. It won't come to any harm, and it's much easier to stop that heifer losing weight by taking the calf off it than it is running that heifer on with the calf and then trying to get some weight back on her before she calves again. So really do use weaning as a tool. Like I say, that calf won't come to any harm as long as it's 5 or 6 months of age. So I've waffled on for 15 or 20 minutes or so, and really what I want you to take away is that calving at 2 can be done, but it does require some additional management. Now, at the start, I talked about some of the barriers to calving at 2. So they're reaching target breeding weight, a perceived increased risk of calving difficulties, and also kind of struggles around rebreeding. And hopefully by talking through the different points, it'll show that it can be done. So if we focus on feeding good quality silage, supplementing if we need to, and making sure that first winter housing is optimum, then these heifers should reach target breeding weight. So the second barrier was perceived calving difficulties. Well, actually, if we use EBVs to select easy calving bulls, this is the best way to minimize calving difficulties, and make sure they are calving down at body condition score 3. It won't increase the risk of calving difficulties. And of course, cull any cows or heifers which persistently require assistance. I mean, one of the farms I visited, if you did have to calve a cow, then that cow had a red tag in her ear, and so did the calf. So he knew that cow was to cull, and he knew not to retain that calf either as a replacement. So we really should be trying to get rid of any calving difficulties. And the third thing was rebreeding success. So this is probably the most tricky stage when we're calving heifers at 2. So again, if we can focus on maternal EBVs, making sure we're looking at fertility and selecting for fertility, that will help. And like I say, keep those heifers in body condition score 3, and also look to wean early if the heifers look to be losing substantial weight. Now, If you're wanting more information on managing heifers, then the best place to go is the AHDB website. We have a whole web page dedicated to managing heifers, and it's Maternal Matters. So if you head over there, there's a lot of information. So there's booklets, there's webinars, there's podcasts, and there's articles following heifers through right from when they're born right through to when we're getting them back in calf for a second time. So please do go and have a look at that. So the website is hdb.org.uk/maternal-matters. And you can also follow us, the campaign, on social media as well. So it's hashtag Maternal Matters. Now, the Maternal Matters campaign has been supported by industry. It's an industry initiative. So I'd like to thank everybody who has been part of the campaign. And like I say, if focusing on fertility is something that you're wanting to do, then please do head across to that webpage, and it'll be able to provide a lot of information or top tips that can hopefully help you with your suckler herds. So thank you ever so much for listening, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Sarah. That was a fantastic presentation. It's really informative and had lots of information for us all to take away there. In light of us publishing this webinar, we've had a few questions come in that we've prepared for you beforehand. The first question I have is, what criteria should we look for when selecting the replacements that we want to keep and calve for at 24 months old?
Great. No, that's a really good question. So I suppose the first thing to look for is, are they the correct weight? So, you know, try and weigh them at 12 months of age, and again then at 15 months of age. So like I say, they ideally want to weigh about 65% of their mature weight at that 15 months of age. The other thing, I suppose, that we can do is, like I said in my presentation, really all we want to do is select the most fertile heifers within the group that we've got. And the easiest way to do that is have a short breeding period and only retain those that are in calf after that short breeding period. If we want to go further than that, then I suppose the best thing to do is look at mum. We all know the importance of looking at the mother. So we need to look at things like, you know, has the mother calved every year? You know, has she got good mothering ability? Does she manage to suckle her calves okay? Because we all know what a pain it is, you know, if a cow's calved at midnight and we're trying to get it suckling. So we want to try and avoid things like that. So really important to have a look at mom and make sure she's one of the best cows in the herd. I suppose the other thing, depending on whether mature, if you're wanting to reduce your mature cow size, then having a look at the heifer size as well. So if it's something you're wanting to reduce, then it might be worth not breeding your biggest heifers, but breeding your average sized heifers to make sure you're trying to reduce that mature cow size. And again, obviously look at mum. If mum's a really big cow, you know, getting onto 750, 800 kilos, then maybe you don't want to be retaining her heifers as replacements. So it really depends what you're looking for within your cows and finding suitable heifers as part of that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. The next question I have is a bit more of a broad one. It's, what benefit can we see on farm for a system where we calve down at 2 years old?
There's so many benefits. So first of all, there's obviously the money in your back pocket. So like I said in the presentation, calving heifers at 2 rather than 3, you're saving about £600. And that's just because she's producing a calf much sooner. So obviously she's going to produce you some profits earlier than what she would do if she was calved at 3. And I suppose there's also the fact that you have an extra group of heifers if you're calving them at 3, and obviously they take up extra resources. So your time, they'll take up grass, forage, So by calving them at 2, you're saving that. And the other thing is, obviously, we have a lot of pressure to reduce our environmental impact. And actually calving heifers at 2 does that as well. So you're spreading that methane that heifer's producing off a greater, so obviously she produced more calves over a lifetime, then you're spreading that methane across the more kilos of beef that she's produced. So it really reduces your environmental impact as well. So there's many benefits. And as I said in my presentation, Chagas in Ireland, they've done some really good work looking at how much a heifer that calves at 2 against a heifer that calves at 3, how much she eats. And it really is quite startling what the difference is. As a producer said to me, I think it was in America, he said, to calve at 2, you really need to be focused on the economics, and that's what will drive you and ensure that you make it successful. So it really does stack up.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And then finally, just a final quick question that we have is, what would be your top tips for someone who's thinking about moving into a 24-month-old system?
Yeah, so again, really good question. So I'd probably start as early as what bulls you're using. So have a think about why you can't calve at 2 at the moment. Is it because you're maybe using bulls that don't have strong maternal traits? You've maybe focused on those terminal traits. So that's the first thing to do. The second thing I would recommend is weigh your heifers. You might actually be surprised that they are at 65% of their mature weight at 15 months of age. So weigh them, and then obviously use, if they have reached that target weight, then do put them in calf, and then just go from there. It's just a case of checking that they are at the right target weight, getting them in calf. And then they will require some additional management when they are in calf during that calving period. So try and keep them at body condition score 3 to ensure then you can get them back in calf again to calve within the 365-day interval. So I'd go for it. I don't know many producers that have started calving at 2 and have reverted back to calving later. It's just a bit of a mindset change, but it does pay off. As the countries I've visited have shown, they've been doing this since the 1970s. So it really does begs the question as to why we aren't doing it here either.
And thank you very much. That's brilliant. I'm very sorry that's all we have time for here today, but I'd just like to say thank you very much today, Sarah, for your time and your presentation. It's been really informative and hopefully very useful to ourselves and our producers.